Hi, I'm Dr Vieth. I'm a professionally trained clinical chemist. I have worked at the University of Toronto at Mount Sinai Hospital for close to 40 years. I am a full professor in the Department of Laboratory Medicine, as well as in the Department of Nutritional Sciences at the University of Toronto. Vitamin D has a long history. Essentially, it started over 200 years ago when Scandinavian fishermen found that their babies could thrive much better if they were given a teaspoonful of cod liver oil. And then in the early 1900s, it was discovered that you could isolate the components of cod liver oil, and one of them was called vitamin D. So it's been around since about 1910 as vitamin D. And vitamin D is pretty much carried on through pediatrics for over 100 years now at 400 units per day. So we need vitamin D in order to make the hormone that helps us regulate the absorbance of calcium. You don't want to absorb too much calcium and you don't want to absorb too little. So there's a regulation process going on. And the means by which our bodies regulate that is by using vitamin D to make the messenger hormone, 1,25-dihydroxy-D, to control the absorbance of calcium from our intestine and from the food. Beyond that, it's also known that severe deficiency of vitamin D predisposes to respiratory illness. There are a couple of mechanisms for that. One of them is if you have weak muscles, you can't properly cough. You can't expel the germs that are in your chest. The other mechanism by which vitamin D influences respiratory infection is just plain by improving the function of the immune system. Vitamin D, again, it's a signaling molecule that controls things, and among other things, one of the things that it controls are immune cells, immune functioning cells, so they behave better controlled when you have enough vitamin D. So what are the different requirements for vitamin D through various age levels? And as you may recall, the basis for the pediatric dose of vitamin D, in other words, 400 international units of vitamin D, is derived largely from the historic use of a teaspoonful of cod liver oil, which was required to help infants to thrive. There's a bit of an evolution of vitamin D requirements for adults because through the 1980s there were clinical trials that were looking as to whether vitamin D may prevent bone fractures in older adults, and it was found that 800 international units of vitamin D in double-blind, placebo-controlled clinical trials ended up reducing fracture rates in older adults. And on that basis, the RDA, or the recommendation for people over age 70 for vitamin D, is double the baby dose, 800 international units per day. Now, from about 1 year of age until 70 years of age, they basically compromised and came up with a recommendation of 600 international units of vitamin D. Vitamin D3 is the thing that animals, sheep, human beings, fish, have as the form of vitamin D, vitamin D3. It's also known as cholecalciferol. But in the early 1900s, it was discovered that if you exposed yeast or a fat extracted from yeast, plant material, to sunshine, it had a biological activity like vitamin D, but it was actually a somewhat different molecule. In terms of American nutrition, vitamin D2 is thought of as equal to vitamin D3, but recent years have clearly shown that vitamin D3 is better. Lanolin historically has been the major source of vitamin D3 production. Lanolin is the oil that you get from the wool of sheep. If you shear a sheep, you'll find that the wool is quite oily, and before you can make a nice wool sweater, you have to get the oil off of it. But that oil is valuable. It goes to facilities where the oil is then exposed to ultraviolet light, And that ultraviolet light converts the vitamin D precursor in that oil into vitamin D3, just like the vitamin D precursor in my skin gets converted to vitamin D3. So you might ask, what about vitamin A and D? The reason they happen to be together is cod liver oil, that was a good source of vitamin D, was a good source of both vitamin A and vitamin D, two fat-soluble vitamins that came very nicely in cod liver oil. And it works fine, but there's no biological reason why those two nutrients have to be put together. They just happen to have conveniently been available. Now, if you wished to increase your vitamin D dose by simply taking cod liver oil, the bad thing that happens is you'd be taking too much vitamin A. Vitamin A is not a good nutrient in terms of excess. So if you're solely interested in raising the vitamin D level, which you should be, then vitamin D as a pure compound separate from vitamin A is the way to go. It's quite a few things, and basically the ideas came from doing clinical research in the past. The advantages of medium chain triglyceride, firstly, that kind of oil is stable. It does not go rancid, so that the material itself will be good. The vitamin D itself is stable and doesn't break down in medium chain triglyceride oil. And furthermore, the medium chain triglyceride has a viscosity or a texture that is reasonably pleasant to take. And coincidentally, through research also, we found that that kind of oil sticks to a nipple or onto a pacifier or, onto the finger and put it into the baby's mouth. Other kinds of oils don't do that. If you took some vegetable oil and put it on your finger, you could not lick off that vegetable oil. Your fingers still would be oily afterwards. So that this is a product that fits a lot of things quite precisely, like putting a puzzle together. From a scientific point of view, with a product, you want that product to be stable in terms of shelf life for both the medium that you're carrying it in, as well as for the agent, the vitamin D, that you wish to be delivering. So those are very important things, and with regard to Ddrops, those are laboratory certified, and they continue to be laboratory certified for every product and followed up for several years. When it comes to what's the best nutrient product to take, the answer is the one that you actually take. If you don't like taking a nutrient, if you don't want to swallow horse tablets for calcium or pills, then don't. With Ddrops, what you can do is simply put the drops onto something, whether it's porridge, soup, piece of bread, a cookie. We've also, in my laboratory, used the Ddrops as a means of putting vitamin D into cooking. We cooked pizzas with it, and it doesn't change, it doesn't break down with cooking. It's quite a stable product in that way as well. So every way you'd wish to look at it, this is an ideal way of taking vitamin D.